Good grief. All right, check, check, check. Audio check. Check, check, check. All right, well, I'm here on the laptop here. Yeah, this is Oliver, and I'm reporting to you from a bunker I call Studio 72, deep behind enemy lines. We salute you, ladies and gents and non binaries that are interplanetary, intergalactic time travelers. You know who you are, and we salute you. I wanted to do a little brief presentation of the housing crisis that's happening here in Portland. So it's dry, boring. It's going to be criticism of a private company that's publicly funded, Home Forward, which used to be called the Portland Housing Authority. Is that what it was? HUD? Was it? I think it was. But there's a couple of significant things. There was a joint task force. Well, no, that would be exciting if they actually had that title. They don't. It was a joint city council and Multnomah County commissioner councilors coming together. And there's been an attempt over the last couple of years to kind of communicate about this housing crisis. And it's near and dear to my heart because as a Portlander, I've worked in shelters. I've worked with at-risk youth who are out on the streets needing shelter. And this was about 20 years ago. But I've also worked with a number of other agency transition projects. I volunteered down there. The whole point was that I bring this up is that this has been something that has been on my radar for a long time. I've had a lot of friends, artists come in, whether they chose to be kind of like vagabond riding boxcar travelers, or whether there was some sort of crisis. Back in the day, it was kind of cool to not be paying rent and to be traveling by train car across the country. For example, I mean, you look at Jack Kerouac or On the Road, some of this stuff, this bohemian type thing. I never personally thought it was something to aspire to, but I've had a lot of different, well, not a lot, maybe a lot's overstated. I've known many different artists and writers that have come through either my art collectives or my gallery spaces or stuff like this. And now as an aging Gen Xer in my hometown for over 50 years in Portland, Oregon, I've seen my housing go from $600 4-bedroom, small little shacky house, but 4-bedroom house for $600 in Southeast Portland. That place now is probably $2,000. And there's not very many of those because we've got the real estate market is so tasty and so juicy that people are just flippers, people from California especially, because they sell a shack down there for $1 million. You can buy 4 shacks up here in Portland, and that's exactly what's been happening for quite a while. Now, I'm not a big hater on that because, for one thing, I've got a certificate in real estate. When my daughter was born, I was like, oh, shit, what am I going to do for big money for this girl? I said, I'm going to go back to college. I was like, I'm going into college. And so that was one of the side things that I went into, just general studies. And that was just community college. But it was something. And on top of that, even more significantly, is that I have worked with local realtors in actually helping their clients flip the houses. And so I have a little bit of blood on my hands being a local artist and knowing paint, being able to do interior painting and exterior painting. But, I can't help but feel a little bit guilty that I did for a survival. I did get pulled into that type of dynamic of and even putting like paintings on the walls. They call it staging in the real estate business. Well, now everything is unaffordable. And what the city of Portland and what Multnomah County and what these leaders are calling affordability or affordable housing, it's not affordable. I mean, we're talking about studio apartments that are around $1,000. 1 and 2 bedroom houses are 12 to 15, or apartments, very small apartments, $1,200 to $1,500. Now, granted, we need a lot more of these small apartments, but we need them at half that price, or we need to have some sort of housing vouchers. Where is that funding going to come from? If it's not going to come from the federal government, how is that money generated? There's Metro that has its tax over people that are making $100,000 a year. They've got the Metro. They are successfully building houses, building apartments, building what they call affordable units, which are not, again, I repeat, they're not affordable. That's why we have about 15,000 people that are either completely houseless or in transitional, staying with friends or family, or possibly, I don't know if they calculate the RVs. I'm not exactly sure how they crunch all the numbers, but it's about 15,000 people. That number just a couple of years ago was around 7 or 8,000. So we have considerable amounts of more houseless people. The reason that that's happening is because these Home Forward, there's also Reach, CDC, there's a whole bunch of different nonprofits, NGOs, that are in this business of renting affordable housing that's not affordable. And we have seen spikes of evictions ever since the COVID struck. So all of the rents are going way up, and the demand has gone up and rents have gone up, but the availability, the selection, and the seriousness with the neoliberal Democrats, they just assume or expect everybody to get up and be doing well. And they're going to get a job and they're going to be doing well, and everybody's going to be doing great. I don't know if that's like just high hopes, or it's delusional, or maybe a little bit of all trying to stay happy, and avoiding their neoliberal Democrat SSRIs. I don't know. I mean, listen, I'm not a huge critic of SSRIs. They don't work and they're addictive, but I don't want to slam people that are struggling. Even the people that have got money that are struggling, hey, people are struggling. Okay, so anyway, that's the long-winded intro. I want to show a couple of videos of the city council, city to county council, where they kind of merged. But and then should I start with the two articles? I've got two Willamette Week articles that are talking about this Home Forward. Now, Home Forward is, like I said, used to be called what the city of Portland referred to as their housing of urban development. And they were the ones that were handling, or supposed to be handling, housing vouchers, for example. Housing vouchers are what low-income people, or people that are struggling with all kinds of different reasons. It's rent assistance, but on a permanent basis. I think he called it Section 8. It used to be called Section 8. Maybe it's still called Section 8 on federal, but these housing vouchers used to be federal funding. It probably is some federal funding in large part. I'd like to know all of the numbers on that, but I think that's how it used to work. Although that money keeps getting shrunk. Trump's just like, Trump's a ball breaker. He is a delusional boomer, if you ask me. But that's a whole nother thing. I don't want to get in on politics. I just want to kind of get this article out and the scandal, because this is a perfect example. This corporate welfare that's happening. These are NGOs that are taking tax dollars, public tax dollars, in the tens of millions, the hundreds of millions, some of them close to billions with a B in public tax dollars, as the crisis has gotten worse and worse and worse. Now, some things came to light this week. Some things came to light about Home Forward. Number one was the board of directors, the salaries, business expenses, going to Hawaii and calling it a convention, all this other crazy neoliberal Democrat policy. This is what Democrats do best. they do these crazy neoliberal national networking type of things where they're involved in stuff politically, whether it's identity politics, all these different reasons, all these different reasons that they're involved, instead of actually getting their nose to the grindstone at home forward and renting out available units by all of us, but city council, that home forward had 100 empty units sitting there. As I always repeat, they're not affordable street or for any houseless communities. They're not people. In fact, most of them are really good people. I can't tell you how many artists I've housed. At one house, I had 15 people in a 4-bedroom house. All of them artists, either musicians. You had to be an artist to be with the crew. And then I've had other buildings, or not me with buildings, but we've rented out 5,000 square foot buildings. I don't want to name them because there may be some artists still trying to make it happening, but along the East Bank River there's a number of buildings. A lot of them were just empty, almost derelict buildings, and they gladly welcomed any dipshit, dumbnut artists that wanted to come in and do whatever the fuck they wanted to do on one of the upper floors. And it kind of, for an artist, it was just like paradise because you got cheap rent. And if you set up kind of a collective, communal kitchen, try to, make a communal bathroom, try to make a communal shower work. We didn't have hot water, so there was cold showers. Okay. Right. But hey, we made some things happen. And I'm just kind of spraying on some of my experiences. So I got 2 articles that talks about home forward, a train wreck. And so the reason that I mention the corporate welfare and the failure of county leadership, they're just really in another bubble. People that are making $100,000 a year, $200,000, $300,000 a year, working for the city or as a counselor, as a commissioner, it's gravy train. Your brain is in a different zone. You're able to afford vacations. You're able to afford the little cabin up at Mount Hood at Rhododendron, which is super jealous of that, or the little beach house over at the coast. You've got second dwellings. You've got third dwellings. Maybe you've even got multiple properties in the city of Portland. I've known that to happen with politicals. So they're in a different zone. It's like, I'm trying to be nice because we have to influence them. We're not going to win the hearts and minds of these leaders by just bashing them verbally over the head. Although they do need some serious bashing politically over the head into the noodle. So let me digress. Get my big mug out of the screen. Let me see if this will share. Keep in mind, I'm on my little Asus laptop. It's a cyborg that is very angry and temperamental. Blood sugar right now. I don't know how well it's going to play or how well it's going to take my very simple commands. But hopefully the Asus handlers will be friendly. So I'm going to click. I'm going to try to share here a couple of things. The first thing I want to do is I'm really debating, do I want to show you the Willamette Week stories or just show you? Let me just go right into the video if it'll let me do this. Okay, so hopefully you can see this, and hopefully you can hear me still. I won't know until I go back and edit. So I don't even know. Actually, I could just bounce back. Is it doing a double? Okay, so can you see me? Is it glitching? Okay, it's still going. All right, sorry about that. I didn't mean to be full retarded. But so this is Commissioner Zimmerman with the city of Portland. He makes some very astute comments, and he's very calm, much calmer than me, dude. He's very collective. He uses the word "I'm bubbling" with frustration or something. I mean, it's just like classic. Like I could tell the mild sedatives, whether the Xanny bars or whatever. I don't know. I don't mean to imply anything. He looks sedated because he's being cool without any drugs. So, but he makes these points here. He's talking directly about Home Forward, some things that came to light. What he's talking about a number of things, but I hope that I've got it queued on this. I call it a scandal. It's friggin' glitching. Gosh, that sucks. It's not going to play that. That's really unfortunate. Okay, well, let me see if I can just go straight to the article.
Concerned that the challenges with overnight are going to be.
Try this one more time. Hang in there. It's probably splicing just because if I'm having problems with the playing audio. But this is Willamette Week, the 21st. So last week, Home Forward Union says it has no confidence or trust in agency leadership after travel findings. The union statements come after WW found that CEO Ivory Mathews spent more than $100,000 on travel in just the last couple of years. So there she is. Here's Representative Maxine Dexter, who's a total train wreck. Instead of dealing with our houseless and the 100 people that are dead every month because they're waiting on wait lists, floating in the river, dead wherever, they're dead in Portland, over 100 a month. She doesn't care. She's down in Texas trying to do some stunt with teens down in Texas. It's just, and here's this guy picking his nose is the mayor. I don't know if you can see my cursor there. These are probably more board members. This is the executive in question. And so we'll scroll down here. The labor union that represents 205 staff at Home Forward says it has no confidence or trust in leadership, quote unquote, of the agency after WW reported on CEO Ivory Mathews' travel spending pattern over the past 3 years. AFSCME Local 3135 President Jennifer McMillan says most of the union members were completely blindsided, quote unquote, by Mathews' travel and her annual salary, which this year is $342,000. Quote, employees are too busy trying to pay basic bills just to survive or even dream of what it would be like to use company funds to go to Hawaii with our families and play on the beach, end quote, she says. Home Forward is the city of Portland's housing authority. It owns 7,000 affordable apartment units across Multnomah County and provides rent assistance vouchers to more than 1,200 low-income Portlanders. But as WW has detained in recent months, it's struggling to fill empty units in a timely manner and failed to keep illegal drug markets out of apartment buildings, all while its housing portfolio has inched closer and closer to financial distress. So we're seeing here this exploitation of the NGO, which is publicly funded NGO. Well, you can't call it an NGO there, boss. You're going to call it a private/public government type of business. It's got a different feel to it. And this is a major train wreck. This just gives us a glimpse into why we're in despair here in Portland with our housing crisis. Now, it's complicated, and there's some other things going on there, but this is a huge part of it. So this article here, I won't read the whole thing, but it's in the show notes. The union is going, it's sounding off. Now, my issue is the union has been compliant, in full compliance of all of this for years and years and years and years because they want their job. And they fight for higher wages for themselves, but they're not fighting for the tenants. They're not a tenants union, right? That's a separate type of focus. One of the Mathews trips stood out both for its purpose and for its cost. In October 2024, Mathews spent 7 days in Hawaii at a cost of $72.69. Mathews says she was there to attend a conference on captive insurance, a type of self-insurance the agency uses. Okay, but images on social media show the trip was also one of leisure. Hundreds of photos Mathews posted publicly, showed her and her family members horseback riding, taking tours of local farms, lounging on the beach, and visiting sand dunes. Quote, the lack of response to the allegations of excessive spending on extravagant travel was a tipping point, and we absolutely have no confidence or trust in the leadership. So what this also came up from Zimmerman's testimony, and I have that link in the show notes for you because the computer would not play 3 YouTube browsers open at once, unfortunately. So that's exactly what he's targeting, is this issue here with they have refused to respond. So it's like corruption in layers and almost saying, F you, we don't need to. We're going to do what we want, and our corruption is our corruption. And they just kept boosting the board of directors of Home Forward, boosting their salaries, raising themselves salaries, boosting themselves in all these extra extravagant type of things, as hundreds of Portlanders are dead in the streets, many of them floating in the Willamette River because they have no shelter. So this tone-deaf, narcissistic, me-first, neoliberal Democrat, she can't get enough. Now, someone would say, well, to be fair, if you were in that position, you would send your family to Hawaii. Actually, no, I wouldn't. But I understand that many of you would say, yes, if you could, you would. Lots of people think like that. That's not the way I think, especially when we're dealing with a crisis like this. So this is going on to, here's another quote. Longtime Home Forward staffer and AFCME member Brad Garau said Mathews' $220 check baggage receipts, both to and from certain destinations, would cost 2 days' salary for him and some of his peers. Quote, some of the board believe that this represents sound judgment of a leader? End quote, he asked. So you've got all the rank and file of the union that's coming in here and questioning it and saying, hey, we've got no confidence in her. And, we're pissed, I guess, what's a union do? They got a process. I think there's a no confidence vote. So that was Sophie Peel from Willamette Week. Now, if I can get this other Willamette Week article. Now, this one just came out a couple of days ago. Let's see here. I might have to go back to the main. I think I might. I got to come back here real quick. Share. Well, you can see that. Embattled Home Forward CEO, hang on, will resign. Now, it doesn't say she has resigned. This is a rumor. This was April 28th. Sophie Peel again. She's a pretty good journalist, fairly unbiased, although you can see some bias in some of her reporting. She works for Willamette Week. That's Democrat-ran, produced operation. Literally. The publisher is in bed, married to a seated, or at least previously seated, high-ranking officer, Democrat Party. Embattled Home Forward CEO will resign. Willamette Week's reporting showed that Ivory Mathews attending conferences while her agency floundered. Not only was it floundering, hundreds of people were dying in the streets, while they, in particular, Home Forward, had hundreds, if not thousands, of available units that took 6 months for them to turn over and lease, as people are drowning, jumping off bridges in the Willamette River. Ivory Mathews, the embattled CEO of Home Forward, the state's largest public housing authority, is resigning. That's according to people with direct knowledge of Mathews' decision, which is not yet announced by the agency. Mathews' impending resignation follows reporting by WW that showed she spent more than $100,000 on agency-funded travel over the past 3 years, crisscrossing the country to attend housing conferences and networking events, even as her agency fell into disarray. Home Forward provides affordable housing and rent vouchers to Multnomah County's poorest residents, but saw its vacancy rate spike 15% last year, and several of its buildings failed to meet their debt service ratios. Home Forward did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Update, April 29th, 9:05 a.m. Home Forward announces Mathews' resignation on Wednesday morning. Michael Bunacore, interim director of the Portland Housing Bureau and former executive director of Home Forward from 2014 to 2022. So they brought him into Portland Housing Bureau, who replaced him, drove it into the ground. Will step in as interim CEO while the agency looks for a new leader. Okay, so I'm sorry. He's saying I'll step in and be an assistant coach. He may not have come from there. Sorry, my misinterpretation. Quote unquote from Michael. Strengthening our accountability to residents, partners, and the public is the top priority. I will carry as interim. Bunacore said in a statement. Mathews said she was committed to ensuring a smooth transition. As Zimmerman mentions in his comments, Counselor Zimmerman, he says it's criminal to have vacant 6-month turnover rates for affordable housing at Home Forward. People are dying, literally. That's not hyperbole. It's not an exaggeration. And it's not just from fentanyl overdoses. Sometimes it's just depression. They're waiting and looking for a glimmer of hope for housing anywhere here on the West Coast, but happens to be in Portland, Oregon. Mathews' impending departure follows 2 weeks of mounting pressure after WW's April 14th story detailing Mathews' extensive travel. So there's the whole travel dynamic, which is a big deal, and it goes into Hawaii. Through it all, this is what gets me. The Home Forward Board of Commissioners defended Mathews. Members of the board, including board chair Matthew Gebhardt, said travel to conferences was an important aspect of Mathews' job, and that she applied lessons learned to Home Forward's operations at home. The agency has not provided a concrete example of anything that she learned and it's been applied at home. But in the 3 years that Mathews have averaged 45 days of publicly funded travel a year, Home Forward kept slipping. What they're not saying is that the houseless keep on dying, literally, one way or another, through violence, through depression, through drug addiction, and death and overdose. As details by a series of WW stories in recent months, 955 vacant units lay unoccupied, and the agency took on an average 6 months to fill an empty unit. Even as 7,500 people slept on Portland streets any given night. This is a couple years ago. The agency's entire housing portfolio, made up of around 7,000 units, was inching closer to financial distress. Residents at the Dawson Park apartments in North Portland begged agency officials to root out a drug market in the building. And policy changes made at Home Forward in 2022, 2023, analyzed by WW, showed that the agency had become more lenient about whom it let into the apartments and less strict about curbing bad behavior, meaning the drug dealers set up shop inside these apartment buildings, Dawson Park, right across from Dawson Park itself, Dawson Park Apartments right across from Dawson Park. Notorious, it's a historical park, notorious place to have gun battles at Dawson Park. Many, many years, decades and decades. That's where the gun battles went down over, in large part, drug sales. In fact, the market there at Dawson Park, the market on the corner, was taking bribes from drug dealers and involved in the actual drug distribution out of the market. Just, I don't know if the innocent elderly Asian couple or family that was doing that, they may have just went along out of fear or went along out of desperation. I don't know. But that's a proven fact. I could find the link to that. Matthew's salary is $342. So Sophie Peel. So there's basically, now they're talking about, they're zeroing in on a couple of really important things. They're zeroing in on the travel expense. And the travel expense, to me, it's unsavory. It's narcissistic. It could be criminal, I guess, but it's even bigger than that. This is exposing a systemic failure, systemic crisis of Portland, where we have one of the only and the largest sole providers of affordable housing for people that are in the streets. That's the only chance that they're going to have for them to even get into. They need to show 3 times, sometimes it's 2 times, like at Reach Properties, they'll allow you to show 2 times the rent to get into the unit. But many of them, management is you need 3 times the income coming in. How is somebody that's struggling with whatever they're struggling, multi-pronged struggling, living in blue tarp cities, living in a tent, and how are they going to show ink on an application and drop down bills? Right? It's very rare. The other thing that these articles aren't talking about is that the eviction rates that Home Forward has been doing, they've been evicting people, just like Reach CDC is evicting people. If you don't have rent, you're going to be evicted. You're struggling, you're having COVID side effects, you're disabled. Sorry, you don't have rent. We're going to take you down Multnomah County and evict your ass. I have seen hundreds of people come and go in my building alone with Reach CDC. They raise rent every month. Home Forward probably does the same thing. And they're evicting people left and right. And they just come and go. There's not enough money to go around. And where they go, nobody knows. Some of them die here in the building. And so they go, but they go in the medical examiner coroner's van. So, which it's hit me very direct after being in this. And I looked for years. I looked for affordable apartments because to avoid shared housing. Shared housing can be really dangerous. Really dangerous. I've had a couple of different stories that I'm not going to go into great detail now, but where I've had single dads bringing in prostitutes and relapsing on drugs, and all of a sudden I'm in a very serious situation. People coming and going. One time, I moved into a place over by Montevilla, and they turned out Satanists, and they were worshiping Satan upstairs. And so it's like, how the F do I get out of this situation? And how quickly and where do I go? Where is the studio apartment for me? A self-employed artist, lower income, got some health issues, but I'm not completely disabled. But the whole point is that single parent, single dad. It's where is that? And it doesn't exist. It hasn't existed since the 15 years that I've been a father. It hasn't existed in Portland. And what they call affordable is way overpriced. So this is a part of the crisis. I just wanted to, I don't know how long I've been, probably going too long, but I just wanted to kind of bring in a different perspective because, I know that anybody that's living outside of Portland, especially conservatives in Oregon, they're Oregonians. And they know that things are going wrong, but they don't know exactly how they're going wrong. And so this right here with those couple of links, we're seeing in real time, in firsthand experience, how this is going wrong. It's way beyond flying to Hawaii and a $350,000 salary. Anybody that's in the houseless service business should not be making more than $50,000 a year. That's the executives. I want everybody else down below lower than that. And I want volunteer staffing to help with all the other things that could be done, just like Salvation Army does. When I worked with Salvation Army Greenhouse with drop-in centers and a residential advocate, a crisis counselor with youth, we had a dozen volunteers every single day that came in. They would help clean. They would help serve the food at night. They would help with all kinds of things. They just wanted to do something. And especially wealthy, elderly people in Portland, they're looking for something to do. and they can be provided. We just need that structure to where they can volunteer. If it's a shelter or if it's a housing scenario, I have a whole bunch of different ideas on how we can solve. Well, solve is really the wrong language to be using when we're talking about houseless crisis. It's a humanitarian crisis here in Portland, and it's we have people dead every day, every month, every year. The amount of our numbers, they're just evicting the people, the businesses, the NGOs, and who are really kind of in bed with the government. It's like we're calling NGOs when they're not really completely free of the government organizations. So but they are in definition talking about 501c3s and these different things. But if you're getting funding from the county or funding from it's like there's a conflict of interest there where you've got business investors who just they're like evict and raise the rents and move in people that are making more money. That's their whole formula with management. That's the exact opposite of what should be happening with these houseless services companies and management, apartments, and the management thereof. Now, let me do a couple of ideas. Now, I like the pods. Now, here in Portland, we have these pods where they're little encampments and they have little tiny houses. And well, they're not little houses, but it kind of like what Snoopy rode on his little doghouse. They remind me of kind of like little human mini doghouses. Unfortunately, I hate to say that. I'm not trying to dehumanize people, and that someone could take that the wrong way. It's not how I'm implying it, but they are really, really small. And I mean, a little house would be a big upgrade and would be awesome. That's going to take a lot more money in function and structure, unfortunately. Although I would argue that the money, the hundreds of millions that are being shoveled into shelters, which is just overnight, which is just temporary, and it's not housing of any kind, that's a colossal waste of money and could be used directly into doing full-time permanent housing, even if it's in pods. That is where people can stay there in their own space, safe and secure. That's a huge issue for people that are out on the streets, especially vulnerable populations and women. Being a vulnerable population, I guess you could think of a whole bunch of demographics that fit into that. But so it's a very serious situation that needs to be completely overhauled. Now, with that, she's like, oh, she's going to resign. I don't want, nobody wants, even Zimmerman and what was, God, I wanted to show the video of her. She is really, really outstanding. She's the other city commission testimony, but it's not showing. It's not going to click on these. She made a couple of great arguments as well. Is that she was talking about there is 10 million or 11 million dollars that was found in the city coffer in the Portland Housing Bureau. They don't know why it wasn't earmarked. It wasn't being used. So for 4 months, they've been in great debate of talking about where does this money want to go. The mayor to just suck it into slush fund. He thinks that, Jesus, he gets very spiritual. He refers out on the street. So everyone is to his perspective. Wouldn't apply it like that. I wouldn't refer to it as that. And then I wouldn't use it as an argument that somehow by cutting the funding for these shelters that we're somehow discarding souls because we don't have a temporary shelter, overnight shelter for these 400 souls, as he referred to. And I found that kind of tacky, but I think I understood that he was trying to humanize the people, but it failed. It failed with me, that's for sure. That's been a big part of the conflict for years, actually, with Multnomah County and the city of Portland, is who's going to fund what, who's going to pay for what. But I like the pod idea, and I think that could be expanded into what we could call it Vanport 2.0. Now, Vanport in the 1940s was a small, low-income community out by the Columbia River where they developed their own schools, they developed their own grocery stores. I mean, it was like it was a city within the city of the parameters of just the housing community. But it was specifically low income, and some of it was to take relocated Japanese internment, our friends that were very poorly and badly treated. Some of it had to be from unemployed Swan Island. They were building the Liberty ships for the war. Some of them were, but and they weren't making enough money. They needed shelter out there. So that was a huge push. Why we needed to create emergency housing fast was for World War II. And I actually have great aunts and great uncles that work at Swan Island, right here, down in those shipyards at Swan Island, and who lived at Vanport. So what happened is it's kind of a sad, tragic story, and they do a music festival, and we've been honoring it every year. Is that the Columbia River flooded? This dam was established to control the water flow. So the Columbia River flooded, and it flooded out Vanport. It flooded out, I think it was 40,000 people in these neighborhoods, these small little houses, not fancy, but they were little shacks, upgraded from what we're calling the pods and these little, Snoopy houses that I call them, not publicly, but I guess I did now publicly, but they really remind me of that type of a thing. But I digress on that. I got to quit bringing that up. So we could call it, we need that here in Portland. We need that. So these pods, it's a temporary type of thing. Now we could use yurts. There is United Nations. I've seen some different type of tent type of housing structures being used over around Gaza to deal with some of the refugees. I think that might have been, maybe it was even Egypt. Some of the areas out through there, it was temporary type of housing that could be used. Now, yurts, you've got a wooden platform or a wooden base. You don't have to, but you could. That serves as a foundation. And then you've got the yurt, which is the canvas, where you can actually sustain a winter in there. It's, even though it's canvas, you can have a little bit of a stovetop fireplace in there, or maybe another type of heating. But that is the volume that is needed at this point. And this next summer, Commissioner Loretta Smith was talking about, we got a whole bunch of evictions coming up in this summer. If this $11 million doesn't get allocated, those people are going to be out on the streets, evicted this summer in the thousands. So let's spend that $11 million now. Commissioner Loretta Smith suggested, I don't know if it was not an official proposal, but she said she could make it for a floor vote. I think if I heard her right. Again, that's in the link in the show notes. Sorry that the computer I don't have high-speed computer to a better brain in this little laptop to show it for you tonight, but you can still take a look at it, and I can still talk about it briefly. It's just not as powerful as hearing someone's testimony like that. But she's talking about, let's spend the money. So let's send it to the county, because Multnomah County is emergency rent assistance. Here in Portland, you can call 211. 211 is our information, Multnomah County information. So they fund that. They got people. It's all cost big money, but it's very helpful. And if you need certain things, they will direct you in certain ways. If you need a resource, you need food, you need housing, shelter, there's all these different, and they'll send you in through different routes, avenues, different suggestions, different phone numbers to call. That all comes through 211. So does the emergency rent assistance. They will send you or allocate you or suggest. They won't do the paperwork for you, but they will suggest these places here may be able to help you. And it's very, very helpful. I have dozens of friends and even neighbors in this building that have been saved from going houseless through that Multnomah County emergency shelter funding. It's not something that the city of Portland has traditionally done. And Mayor Wilson is trying to pull the city, or has pulled the city, pulled us, all of us, and the tax dollars into these shelters, which are in large part temporary shelters, overnight emergency shelters that everyone's kicked out with all of their stuff, their shopping carts and loads of stuff out into the streets and on the sidewalks of Northwest Portland and then downtown Portland. And they don't have a bathroom except for Multnomah County Library. Nobody's letting them use the bathroom. So they've been using the bathroom on the sidewalks in front of businesses. This is a part of the demise of the Downtown Portland Business Alliance. This is a huge part of the demise of Portland's small business, is this influx of people that have no place to go during the daytime or have them secure. Many of them have been released literally from mental institutions at the state hospital. And that remarkable, ignorant move came from Governor Kate Brown, who is best friends forever with Governor Tina Kotek, up for re-election. And this, I don't want to don't get me off on a tangent. I'm talking about politics, although we do have next month, we have a primary. There's nobody primarying Tina. No Democrats are going to make her work for her money. Nobody is going to challenge Tina. There is going to be challenges on the Republican side too, and there's a number of people running in the general election. So, and they're running now for the primary. I'll do a separate video and I'll talk about some of these guys just to be kind of, or maybe not. I don't know. Some of this stuff is so dry. I can't find an audience for it. It's just people don't care. It's just not interesting stuff. It's depressing doom and despair, and houselessness and crisis and what's our demise in modern America. It's depressing. It's depressing. And when you've got it all around you in the apartment building that you're in, which is me, and all the other hundreds of other apartment buildings that are going through the same type of crisis. Imagine Home Forward. Imagine that Dawson Park apartments out there where you've got serious, probably cartels, if not cartels directly in the building. Keep in mind, this is a neoliberal Democrat city's policy of sanctuary city. The Multnomah County has made it a sanctuary county. Governor Tina has kept and maintained a sanctuary state, where that is protecting directly the human trafficking into the entire West Coast. But because California and Washington and Oregon are all protecting this sanctuary status, unfortunately, as we're trying to help all these people that are in crisis, strangers in crisis around the world, we are not able to determine which ones are the cartels until the feds come in and do an investigation and do some arrests. We're harboring the criminal cartels with included the good people that have bypassed all avenues of existing legal migration status. The system is moving too slow for them, and they have come here illegally. And they are not determined illegal in Oregon. They are determined potential renters. And so I don't want to blame, because the numbers are much lower than what a lot of conservative framing and talking points are talking about in Oregon. There is other areas in the country where it is very, very significant, where you've got 80% of the apartment buildings are all not cartel, but could be cartel. Colorado, there has been a number of stories. Illegal, non-citizens that have not done their proper paperwork. That number, I don't see those numbers here in Portland like that. That's affecting the housing. There might be some rural Oregonians that want to argue with me that, and I'd be happy to do that, because the data just doesn't support that the illegals, non-citizens are taking our jobs and taking our housing. And there is a cost. And that did come up at the meeting yesterday, where Commissioner I think it was Samal, the Indian guy. He brought up the fact that he was really upset that the gay and lesbian camp with BIPOC, and that's where a large part of the non-citizens are been staying. These I can't remember what camp it was, from Eastern Portland, and that's all he was cared about, because he identifies with the gay and lesbian community. He identifies with a person of color. So it's his priority, and he's going to mention that up there at the kiosk. He's going to make this argument, drilling down on the administrators who are being grilled down in the interview area. You can see all of this in the video that I posted. And that's his priority. So in this narcissist, self-absorbed, it's his self-serving priority, which is, again, a repeat pattern along Portland boundaries in county guidelines. These DEI policies, that's one thing. Now, granted, I'm not a hater. What I have issues with is that if we're prioritizing these small little identity politics factions, we have hundreds of people, in large part, white guys, usually men in their middle age, who are dead and houseless in the streets because they're low priority. They're not the ones. So there's no like take a number and get a line at DMV. It's a direct and specific with the lowest, the 0.5% of the 1% of the houseless, whether it's the trans youth or trans, and I'm glad there's people helping them. I've worked with them outside in, it's on and on. Janus youth programs. Oh my God. And they're doing great work. I'm not trying to ridicule them. I'm specifically addressing when we're paying millions of dollars in staff to look for just those identity politics numbers, when we have all of these huge tens of thousands of numbers of houseless that need services at the bottom. I don't think it's fair. And it's not just because I identify with a non-Caucasian, non-Hispanic, or I do identify with, what do I identify with? You know, it's like, I really don't fit in anywhere. But my point is that it's not a self-serving myself and my preference, anything like that. It's just I see how the system is failing, and it's failing huge, and it's only going to get worse with this war, World War IV in Iran. It's going to tank. It's going to hyperinflate gas. It's going to tank the economy even worse. The time delay is months down the line. Months down the line, we're going to be seeing the shockwaves of this Trump and Iran under control of what appears to be an IDF influence, if not command center, these shockwaves of the tsunami, the IDF tsunami in the Middle East. These shockwaves are going to be economic, and it's going to be devastating. There's no way to avoid it. We were probably heading for and I'm not an economist, and I'm not giving any financial advice here. You know, that should be obvious. I'm an artist. I'm a painter here, and I'm doing my thing, right? I'm a guy that's got my own opinions. But there should have been a market correction, probably with Biden. But now with Trump, there was already going to be written into the books a market correction. And that could be as bad as 2008 with the housing bubble bursting and tragedy, despair type of housing tsunami bursting, or it could be manageable. I don't know. But at this point, I don't think any of that's possible. I think it's going to be huge. And we're going to see what I think is really important at this point is that here in Portland, in Oregon, is that we start identifying where people are coming from. Where did you lose your job? Where did you lose your housing? What state? Are you an Oregonian? Are you a veteran from Oregon? Are you a family with children? You have children that you born here in Oregon. These are the type of preferences, not the identity politics, not the trans, BIPOC, all of this stuff that the city council is completely obsessed with. Multnomah County has written in millions of dollars into their budget for a specific DEI office and DEI officers to monitor the entire county operations and make sure it's abiding by these bizarre social engineered identity politics. Now it's bizarre to me. Neoliberals think they're normal. Neoliberals think this is equity this, equity that, and oh my God, we're on stolen land and we gotta reparations. Let's just focus on taking care of the community at large. Okay? And if we're gonna zero in on people, how about we focus on children? How about we focus on the houseless families, the low income families, the ones that need the housing vouchers the most, the ones that are in jeopardy of losing their housing, if not already houseless now. When I was out in Park Rose years ago, they had the highest number of students in the Park Rose Elementary and High School that were houseless. Houseless students coming to school, coming to class, and their family has no shelter. And it was in the tens of thousands of students. Now, I have to double check the data on that, but they led the entire area in Park Rose. It's a very diverse community in Park Rose. I actually liked it, except for now it appears it's gone into complete Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome. Right after we left, it was fairly livable. I mean, there was some issues at Gateway Transit Center. I mean, there was definitely fights and gunshots and blood on this concrete there pretty regularly, but it was manageable. But we're going back 6 years. That's when I left Park Rose. That's when I came in here into the REACH CDC. It's a low income tax credit housing, which is kind of a special IRS type of funding. It's not low income. They have a cap. So we've got people here that are making, $50,000, $60,000. That's the cap, somewhere in there. And then we got people that are struggling and have got a couple of housing vouchers, and they're, trying to get their life together, trying to make it happen. And there's families that, although a lot of them have moved out. But I digress on that. It's in conclusion, to recap, I wanted to show with this corruption, yes, we knew these issues were always going on, but this is a firsthand look into that neoliberal mindset that's involved in housing business. This is the housing administration. These are the board of directors of Home Forward, the board of directors of REACH CDC, the board of directors. What's some of the other ones? There's a whole Transition Projects. Transition Projects is huge. They handle a whole bunch of adult shelters type of dynamics. They get a lot of funding from the city of Portland. They're on that. But Home Forward has completely ignored the demands for several months from audits, investigation, and now it's full-on corruption has been cracked. Sophie Peel, I believe, there might have been some other players involved, but I think she wrote it. I think it was her investigation. I'm not sure if I'm giving her credit when she doesn't deserve it, but if she is responsible for it, she needs a salute and some credit for that, because it needed to be brought to the forefront. We knew that there was problems. I know because I'm here. I'm listening. I'm on teleconference calls, teleconference videos with other as a volunteer, just listening and kind of checking things out. We knew there was problems. There's problems with my own place here. There is problems with this. They have sold hundreds of houses that were in large part for elderly. They have now, after 50 years, they are selling these houses, not the apartments, the houses, because they are in financial trouble and their administration costs are so high. paying $150,000, $200,000 for this board and these administrations, and they protecting and keeping all this people padded, and they're just doing it right out of the blood of the low income and just keep raising the rents every year, raising the rents, doing literally sucking the blood, sweat, and tears out of low income, lower income, middle income families to support the administration. And now we're seeing firsthand with Home Forward that this is in large part, it's criminal, as Zimmerman calls it. He was calling it not flipping over, but not flipping the units fast enough over. That's what they call it, flip the unit over. When I was kind of working as assistant manager for grandma out in Park Rose, she had 50 units she was a manager of, and I was flipping the units. I would do it within a day. I mean, part of not cleaning. She had cleaners come in. That'd be a couple of days. I'm not a cleaner. I'm the painter. But come in, fill the holes, paint it, boom, 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 boom. I could do that in a day and a half, 2 days. And then you got the carpet guys. So, I mean, the turnover was less than 30 days. Less than 30 days. Now, that was a private owner. That was, I think Menashe owned that one. There's two different families in Menashe. So when you say Menashe, people are like, oh, yeah, those guys. Oh, and it's like, no, hang on. You can say what you want about the Menashe families, but there's two separate Menashe families. And regardless, that's a long history now. We're all gone. She's long gone out of there herself. But the reason I brought that up is because I know what it takes to flip. And you got to know what you're doing, but, you could get easily in 30 days. There's nobody that was doing that. Not only that, I mean, obviously nobody. If it's 6 months, if there's nobody turning over the units, if they're not leased, they got 1,600 units that are not leased. That's nobody's painting the unit. Not only is nobody posting a Craigslist ad to bring in people or taking referrals, better yet, just take the referrals off of Multnomah County or referrals coming out of Project Portland Respond, Project Respond, whatever those people that are out in the street talking head to head with the houseless campers. Project Respond, I think it's called Project Respond. Talk to those guys and let's get them with housing vouchers, even if it is, although it's a setup and a trap, if you're only going to do it 1 year, even if it's only for 1 year or 2 year on a housing voucher. We may have to go into that initially instead of the full-on Section 8, which is until your death or until you commit a crime or until you turn it in and say, I don't need it anymore. You have the housing voucher for life. Generally speaking, there could be some. Now, we could modify that out here at Dawson Park. I believe there's cartels in there. I could be wrong, but I can tell you right now, the dope is coming from cartels. With the Biden's open borders, there's same rat lines. Even with closed borders, you've got rat lines that are still able to move junk around, move the dope around. And I can tell you right now that it was the junk out there at Dawson Park. If it's not cartels embedded, let me just say, I had a memory, I had a flash. We had a cartel guy. This is a true story. In my building, a cartel guy, which it turned out, I couldn't figure out how he was getting in the building and who he knew, what was going on. Turns out he was making dope drops. He was making heroin, fentanyl, maybe even cocaine drops in my building. And it was on the second floor. It wasn't the fourth floor. Second floor, and maybe even the third. But he never made a drop on the fourth floor because we're tied up here on the fourth floor. At least that I'm aware of. He had to have been sneaky, but this cartel kid, young kid, 20, I'm calling him 20 because I'm 50s. He was in the building making drops, making deliveries, coming and going like he was a tenant. At first, before I started getting the discussion and talk, people were photographing him and confronting him. But for almost a year, this guy came and went making drops. He was using vacant apartments to use the shower, do cooking. He was using them as like his apartment, temporary apartment. And I know that because the guy that does the flipping, I wouldn't call him a janitor, maintenance crew dude. He told me he walked into an empty unit and the guy comes out naked out of the shower, out of this apartment that's empty, that he's, it's got to be flipped. And he's like, "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. In fact, you're not even supposed to be in the building. Get the fuck out of the building, man." And so it was like that. This happened a couple times with this guy. This was a couple years back. It wasn't recent, but it was right around that COVID, when all the COVID checks were coming out and all those COVID dollars. Well, those guys made a bank on that. But that guy was in our building. That's exactly what's probably happened at Home Forward. Is in whether he's moved in and then he's paying someone's rent and then they start the distribution out of there. The problem is a downward spiral, because you can't get good people to say move in there and stay if they know what's going on. So you got a downward spiral. You got people that have got addiction problems that are maybe making money off of using and dealing. That's often how it happens. If you don't know the drug business, it's the users. You're using their supply. You never ever use your own supply. They all use their own supply. That's what fuels the drug deliveries. That's what fuels the manufacturing. Often, I'm talking smaller level stuff, but not this big cartel fentanyl shit. I don't even know how they fucking do all that. I know it's chemicals. They know China's providing it, but my point is that I did see what Home Forward tenants are complaining about, is that management was doing anything. So they didn't install cameras. We got cameras everywhere. We got cameras all around our building. We got cameras in the lobby. Now we got cameras on every fucking floor. It's a little invasive, but you know what? If it keeps you safe, or when a crime goes down, it helps us catch the son bitches, especially like sexual assaults, things like this. You got to have camera. So, but don't let me slip into an argument where I'm talking about civil liberties versus security with cameras. But you have to have cameras. The point is that Home Forward was not doing even basic. I mean, if there's distribution on that level going on, that it's clearly it was. You have to make an intervention. If you're not going to act like the police, you're the building, the units, you have to bring in outside and at least get it recorded that there's been a raid or there's been an arrest. But it sounded like Home Forward was allowing these drug dealers to stay in. So if you got a felony for drug use or even drug delivery, it wasn't enough to evict someone out of a unit. Some crazy shit like this. That's the exact opposite of any good management policy. Why in the F would Home Forward do that? They're just going to keep them there? No. And when you get the bad seeds out, you flip it over within 30 days. If it's not demolished, you can do it in a couple weeks with an interior painter. Maybe even hire a crew if you can't find one guy to do it fast. I can paint a unit in a day. If you got a crew, they should be able to do it in a couple of hours. Carpet's another thing altogether. And if there's serious damage, that's another thing. Granted, altogether, I don't want to oversimplify the expense of the management, but I've done it for years. I know how to turn over. I know how to flip. In fact, I've got a certificate in management, property management, and real estate I've never used because the training and on-job work I did was before I was even certified. I mean, what's a piece of paper saying you got a real estate certificate? But I would love to get into professional management. I mean, that's what is my calling. And so it's like, I've got to figure out who I need to talk to, because I am exactly the hard ass dude with good people skills to clean up any building that's in despair. Although I have to say, I'm not really in the mood for going up against the cartels in Dawson Park Apartments. I don't have that on my bingo card right now. And I know my daughter doesn't want to do gun battles with the cartels out at Dawson Park Apartments either. So I'm not sure when I say that. It's coming down the line because it needs to be done, and that's where I'm headed. I can feel it as far as on a career level, but outside of the artwork, of course. Management is my calling. But that's another reason why is when I see bad management, I hear these stories, especially in the situation of the housing humanitarian crisis of low-income housing and lack of low-income housing in Portland. It's like, man, this is like, I got goosebumps, man. My hair's stinging. I'm just like, this is serious shit. This is like right in my court. This is my department. This is in my field. But then how do we change it? And the bureaucracy down there at City Hall it's not moving fast. Now, I have hope with Zimmerman. I have hope with Loretta Smith. I have hope that we can make the changes. But that Home Forward board has completely need to be flushed out. Commissioner Zimmerman mentioned we need to do re-interview everybody that's on that board. Not re-interview, rehire. Everyone needs to go. They were all backing her. They were all voting in their own salary increases as they got her salary up to, $250,000, $350,000 a year. They were all coming along for the ride. You see, it's the gravy train. And that same thing happens, unfortunately, in politics. Multnomah County, in the city of Portland, there's all this type of gravy train politics that's always plagued us that prevents us from getting serious about low-income units because it goes into affordable housing where the investors and the payout is much greater. Low income doesn't produce the money, and that's how we got into this crisis. It was corruption, it was COVID, it was bad policies. It's a whole bunch of things. And, without getting into too much of the politics, it's the Democrats have been controlling things for 30 years. But the way that the Republicans candidates avoid this issue and talk about wanting to cut funding for homeless services and cut funding for low-income housing, I can't say that I can feel good about backing a Republican governor in Oregon without them making significant changes in that messaging when it comes to our houselessness, because we're all going to go houseless with a Republican governor. I mean, there's corruption. We got to root that out. But at least Tina is there willing to cut the checks. They may be corrupt checks. We may need to check the checks and check them, put them in check, which we obviously do. And that's happening here with Home Forward. Overhaul them, just like we got to overhaul anything anywhere when it comes to it. But I have to give a little bit of credit to Tina when she has stepped up and said that this is housing. Now, she zeroes in. I criticize her because she's not doing what we need with the low income. She's not proposing Vanport 2.0. Vanport 2.0 is going to be, I'm talking like I got the deal done. I don't have the deal done. Vanport 2.0 would be what Vanport 1.0 was a community for low income families and housings. They created their own school there. They created their own little grocery stores. It really is truly a phenomenon. It's so old and so far back that unless you're a historian buff or old school Portland that's a historian buff, you wouldn't even know that it happened. And you wouldn't know that they got flooded out and they were on the Columbia River, right where the indigenous tribes used to set up their teepees. And, it's one thing I was thinking is like, we could do yurts, we're going to need about 1,000. So we're going to need about 10 little communities of 100, at least 1,000 to get these going. Now, keep in mind, there's about 15,000 homeless people in Portland, but many of those are not going to work well with other people. We need to go back into a more structured state hospital where Governor Kate Brown, during the COVID hysteria, released them all onto the streets. And they never went anywhere, except for maybe back to jail or prison or back into a jail or prison, or maybe not even there. maybe not even there. The DA has not been prosecuting people that have got these mental health issues. So, that we got to do some screening, and we got to get Multnomah County on the same page. So that Vanport idea is the two that I'm suggesting is because of the size that it was, we could have clinics out there. You have to have clinics, detox, little medical clinic with the pharmacy. Now, all of these apartments, these low-income units that are being proposed, if they're going to do construction in the next 10 years, that's on the radar. We'll see how it pans out. They really should all have a little health clinic in the basement, along with their little laundromat. Usually the first floor is their anchor tenants. Here we've got a pizza shop, and there was a bubble tea place, and he couldn't make it happen. And there was an empty space, which they're building another set of Reach apartments up on 73rd, right up the street here, 73rd and Foster. And so, which is going to be very, very similar to the structure. You've got your anchor tenants down there. Put your health clinics in there. The small, not Legacy, not OHSU, not all these huge corporate conglomerates, these smaller, little personalized, like Center for Natural Medicine, little naturopathic little centers where you can put massage therapists in there. You can have your chiropractors in there. I mean, I can go in and hit 2 or 3 medical practitioners at where I'm at for the Center for Naturopathic Medicine. The Center for Natural Medicine right across from Fred Meyer's on Cesar Chavez in Hawthorne, which is an amazing place. I mean, check it out. I mean, they're pretty good. They're pretty good, but their formula with their little housing structure is that upstairs you've got acupuncturists, you've got your massage therapists, you've got chiropractors, and they're doing this all in one-stop shopping. You should even, there's a couple places that do this, you should even have a pharmacy. Yes, a pharmacy inside next to these smaller little micro health clinics. You should consider a detox in these little buildings. These are micro little buildings. I don't know how many floors, 4 floors, 3 floors, 4 floors, just like what they do. They build 4 floors. That's because there's a cap on how high you can build these. They go to 4 floors. The first floor is the anchor tenants with the business and the marketing, free enterprise. So that's just one idea is developing on. How's that money? Where's that money going to come from, boss? I think we can make it happen, but it is going to take construction. It's going to take time. Before those ideas can even be debated and / built, we need something quicker like Vanport 2.0. Vanport, which is small. I envision almost kind of like yurts, teepees. Wooden teepees look cool where the teepees used to be 250 years ago or 100 years ago. Maybe teepees are cheesy, but yurts, any type of smaller type of structures, mini housing that is 24/7. People can find their safety. They can find services. If they want a detox, they're ready to detox. They can do that. It should be available out there close by. And all of that into, just like with the Wapato jail reconstruction. It's similar. I don't know if they're doing full on what I said. That was a private business that actually did that. I think it was Schnitzer money. Schnitzer family's got a lot of money in Portland. I think it was Schnitzer, and then there was, I'm forgetting. Wow, I'd have to look it up. But I went to a couple of their different meetings, and I actually went and checked out a couple of their places. And I was helping pitch them to the public because the neighborhood associations just lose their fucking minds. They go bonkers, and they're like, oh my God, homeless people are coming into our penthouse neighborhood. And I understand they're invested. I understand. I don't want to mock them, but we have to have these facilities to improve all of our quality of life, to prevent the feces and urine in front of our small businesses, to help minimize and reduce the crime that's happening on the streets. We have to provide some low-income housing, and that has to go somewhere. That's why Vanport out by the Columbia River is such an appealing proposal. You can have one main building and almost serve as like an emergency shelter if it's wintertime or there's a cold spell or even a hot spell, with like a heat dome type of event or something. You know, you can have maybe a more of an air conditioned cooling unit, a main unit, but and then out from there, you, like I said, with the possible the detox in the clinic, laundromat, you got showering services, all these different little structures happen as the main building or part of a couple little buildings. And then you've got your smaller housing out and around on that to get things going, expanding the pod concept into one step up into it's almost basically the same thing of these pod construct, but I'm thinking just a little bit bigger, a little bit, but the yurts, that's temporary tent type of thing. So I don't know. So, but the other thing that could happen there at Vanport, and this is how we pitch it to the big money neoliberals, is we could do a Vanport museum, do a permanent little museum, and with the photographs Vanport has been doing, and we could do a music festival. So we've got, you know, a little stadium, little stage type of thing, and this little structure where we have the permanent Vanport flooding museum, Vanport Museum with all the rich cultural heritage, and then the artwork, and then we would have the music event out there, which I think they've been trying to do that every single year until COVID hit. COVID it did stop it for a couple of years, I'm sure, but so this whole Vanport celebration of the music and the arts and everything that was surrounded, that came out of that culture, out of that North Portland, out of our community of low-income workers that were out there. So we can pitch that museum idea. I also have the idea of creating kind of like a reggae hall, like type of residence where you've got musicians, artists in this type of music hall, creating music with the community and interacting, and it could be done right there in this huge, large Vanport 2.0 project that I'm proposing. We'll need to draft up some architectural plans, and if we can do that, and just some basic kind of like floor plans. I could do that as an artist. I could do just some basic kind of ideas of what I'm talking about. So I sprayed out a whole bunch of ideas there. The other thing is that with the Multnomah County, we need a joint type of slush fund for emergency rent assistance that the city kicks into and the county kicks into. I think that's the direction that we should go. There should be a joint account. There should be a joint service. There should be a joint city and county working together with that emergency rent assistant program. And we need to focus on getting those vouchers. Vouchers coming from the federal government is in large part. Metro, with their tax, I don't know why we can't start using X amount of millions of dollars from that Metro tax and kick that into the voucher program. We don't need to talk about an additional bond and additional taxes, which might fail in this bad economy with how soured the Portland community has gone with these scandals and scams and failures of just basic care and basic shelter to our Portland community. We have to rebuild trust. It's completely shattered. And the people that are making the big money down at City Hall and at Multnomah County building, they're totally checked out. They are in a different bubble than the people that are struggling because of that money. They're able to eat well. Their vacation, they can drink nice wine. It's a totally different, and I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying those folks, in large part, not everybody, but those folks in that mentality are not thinking about a humanitarian crisis. Governor Tina Kotek is not serious about the housing humanitarian crisis. She keeps talking about building affordable housing. Well, those are beehives. Those are for the worker bees. Yes, the teachers and the police. Yes, it's needed. We do need that additional housing in Portland because there's been so much pushback on this developing of this urban infrastructure in the housing. A lot of the old school Portlanders pushed back and shut this down in neighborhood meetings, neighborhood associations, because they didn't want they were worried about their parking spaces and 100 units, apartments, they're all going to have cars. It still comes up at every neighborhood association meeting. Anywhere you are in this city is parking and parking wars and parking crisis. That's what these neoliberal property owners are worried about. Property. They're parking. So isn't that funny? I'll tell you what, if we don't take care of low-income housing, your parking issue is going to be exasperated because it's going to be broken into and your cars are going to be stolen, or you're going to have people sleeping in your cars and vans and trucks because they have no place to go. Right? Pretty much, but that might be a bit hyperbolic, but maybe not. There's tents all over in our parks and have been for several years, ever since COVID amplified it. It was a problem before, but COVID just amplified it. And then with the Democrats releasing all of these prisoners, Governor Kate Brown released all these prisoners, mental health people, released all the state hospitals. We've never recovered from that. This is something that's left out of the argument on all sides, county, city, even statewide. Nobody wants to address what those Democrat policies were in this crisis of COVID hysteria, thinking that this super flu, as dangerous as it was going to kill everyone like a bubonic plague. It just wasn't the case. It turns out it was a planned drill. COVID-19 was from a biolab built by gain of function and came not just out of one oopsie daisy release, but it actually came out of multiple places and events intentionally. I believe that, and that's just my opinion, but there's evidence to back that up, including indictments that are being investigated right now. So that's an hour and a half. I'm going to go back and see if the audios, if this is even savable. If it's not, I'll probably pull it. I didn't get a whole lot of crowd. I see there's no chat that came in, so it's probably the subject and part I don't get a crowd with this laptop. I have to be on the phone app to actually bring in a crowd, but I didn't really want to. I wasn't looking to be interrupted and interacting with the crowd on this one necessarily, although I love to do that on the phone. I love to do that on my lives, but just because I like the interaction. But this, I just wanted to get out those ideas. I wanted to show you the video of what Council Zimmerman is saying. This guy is actually fighting common sense and making common sense arguments. Commissioner Loretta Smith sounds highly intelligent, not obsessed with identity politics in her arguments yesterday. I've heard her make a lot of wild identity politics arguments in the past. I don't care. I'm just saying it is what it is. Common sense arguments that she made needs to resonate, and they need to be listened to. The $11 million should, if it has to be used, sent to the county to let them use an emergency rent assistance. That's a brilliant proposal, Commissioner Smith. That's a brilliant idea, because it's not going to reach, even if it makes it in the fall or winter, it's not going to save the thousands of people that need it this summer in Portland. And Zimmerman was on mark. He says, if we can't zero in on Home Forward's corruption, what are we doing here having this conversation now? We don't really need to be talking about anything else except we're zeroing in. We got thousands of units that are available right now. Right now. Think of that. Of all this discussion for the last couple of years, we got no housing, we got no apartments, there's no place for them to go. The whole effing time, there was at least 1,000 apartments available to take in people that were cognitive and aware and detoxed and in a bad spot, but available and willing to improve their life and quality of life if they get shelter. They just need shelter. And then maybe employment comes from there. Well, obviously employment comes from there. It's very difficult to maintain or even seek employment without shelter. But to maintain, you're going to maintain a job without a house? People do that. People do that. There's students that are going to our public schools and they don't have a place to call home, but they're called students in Portland public school system. That breaks my heart. That breaks my heart. It breaks my heart that we have so many houseless children and they're flying under the radar. People are acting like it's no big deal, and home forward executives are just voting and focused on their pay raises and salary increases and their Hawaiian trips every couple of weeks, months, whatever it is, every 3 times a year, down into the politics of some houseless neoliberal organization that they're achieving to get the title of being a VP, which apparently she did. So maybe even after losing this job, she probably just going to go shift on over into this other homeowners association, whatever the hell it is that she just now recently she was lobbying to get into on a national level. This is national politics. So she had her national political ambitions that prioritized the dead and starving children in Portland. It's criminal. And it needs to change. God bless. Oliver out.